Hey, this is Arthur Walker, author of the Ouroboros Saga sci-fi series, and you're listening to Dead Hand Radio.
This is Andrew Hall, host of Dead Hand Radio. My guest for this episode, Arthur Walker, is a writer, artist, philosopher, game dev, and consultant. He's a creator of worlds on page and on screen, and he's a brilliant individual. In this episode of Dead Hand Radio, Arthur and I discuss creative pursuits and share ideas about artificial intelligence, quantum computing, machine learning, and consciousness. Of course, an episode of Dead Hand Radio would not be complete if my guest and I didn't talk about the Cold War at some level. And during our discussion, we certainly do touch on the topic of the Cold War and how AI is connected to that time period. Finally, we close out our conversation with a jaunt into the post-apocalyptic genre and consider the possible or inevitable destruction of Earth and the potential for humans, with the help of AI, to prevent that from happening. It was a very intellectually stimulating conversation, and I'm so glad to have had the opportunity to explore these topics with someone like Arthur. Welcome to Dead Hand Radio, Arthur. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
What state do you actually live in?
I live in Kansas.
Oh, okay.
I live in Wichita, in the literal belly button of America.
Gotcha. So Wichita is a fairly big city, though. It's not like what you would think of it as Kansas being wide open fields with, nothing but plains for miles. But Wichita is a fairly big city, isn't it?
Yes. I think the greater metropolitan area is about 350,000 people. And I hesitate to say it, but it is a pretty cool place to live. I'm not from Kansas. I've been here about 6 years and I'm really enjoying it. But for the kind of writing that I do and I don't know, just my work in general, this has been a really good place to be because of how centrally located it is. And the population density here is really low, so it's easy to get around, and there's lots of good food to eat. Kansas knows how to food really well.
Nice. What is their primary industry in that area?
Aerospace. Yeah, that's the airplane capital of the world. Yeah, they do a lot of flight training and stuff here too.
Okay. Well, a lot of wide open spaces in that area. Is there a military base nearby?
Yeah, there's a couple, and there's one. Because I think because there's so much aerospace here, they wouldn't let us have a hub type airport in addition. So we've got a kind of a small commercial airport, but there's, I don't know, 7 or 8 private airfields or something in the area. It's you have this picture of there being just planes flying overhead all the time or something like that, but it's not really like that. It's a lot of blue collar people working on sites to build the airplanes, and it kind of adds to the concrete culture that is Wichita. And I kind of, being from Idaho and kind of having a blue collar background, I'm just a little more comfortable here as a result, I think.
Yeah, Idaho, man, you're talking about sparsely populated. That's I don't know if it's if they even have what you would call a big city in Idaho at all.
No,
But a lot
not
of
really.
forests and beautiful country over there.
Yeah, indeed. And I've hiked it all. It's a magical place to visit.
I don't know exactly when we first connected on Twitter, but it was definitely through our mutual friend Evan um, on Twitter, and because he kind of, when he finds something that he enjoys, he raves about it. And I don't say that in a negative way. I mean, he just really likes to help people get noticed for their work, for their contributions, and uh, it just got my attention. So I started looking at your books. And I apologize, but I can't pronounce how the title of your books. Can you say it?
Uh, Ouroboros.
Okay. For some reason, that's a hard word for me to pronounce.
Oh, it's one of those words, and it's got like different spell. Like one of the major hurdles for me was trying to pick which of the various ways you spell that word I was going to use in the title. Not just to, try to prevent confusion, but also for ease of pronunciation. And there was no good choice. But in terms of what an Ouroboros is and stands for, it's a really good. Um, it's a really good single stand-in for the series itself. So I ended up just kind of rolling with it anyway.
Cool. Cool. Well, I don't want to rehash a bunch of stuff that you've already talked about. I know that you did a pretty extensive discussion on the book series and some of the symbology that you integrated into the books on Evan's podcast. So I would like to refer people to go check out From the Waste, which I think I promote his podcast almost every episode because he's interviewed everybody that I'm talking to right now. But he's a good guy and he deserves the exposure.
It's wise on your part. Evan's a master content aggregator. I mean, one of the reasons I follow him on Twitter is because he's authentic and it doesn't shine me on. Whatever he finds is almost going to be durably good over time. So
I agree. Well, present company included, because if it weren't for him, I don't know if I would have seen your books, but I'm glad I did. And I think I have all of them now, but I haven't finished all of them. Um, as I've said in a few other episodes, people are probably getting sick of me saying this, but I'm a slow reader.
I am too, and I'm probably 4 or 5 behind on every podcast I listen to. Also, I've never caught up on that.
Yeah, I recently think was it you that had reached out and were interested in finding somebody to do recordings for your books? Are you getting ready to turn those into audiobooks?
Yeah, there's a local. He works for. He's a reporter and weekend producer for a local news station, and he reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I want to kind of break into voice acting and voiceovers and stuff like that." And I said, "Well, it seems to me I'm kind of a sci-fi guy, but the post-apocalyptic community sort of adopted me, and I'm glad because it's a really good community." And I said, I don't know if they have a go-to voice actor for their content, if they have somebody in the community that is sort of known. Like I think the last person that I was aware of that kind of did that was one of the first people on Evan's podcast. And I do game development with a partner, and we do video games for mobile platforms. And we started looking for, we put out a call for voice actors, and we got like all kinds of people. Everything from people who had never done it before to people that had done voiceovers for like anime on TV and stuff. and we were like, wow, okay, so this is kind of a crowded place. And that's, when I started doing, kind of doing some consulting with the guy I'm talking to about doing audiobooks for me, I was like, you need to find a, I don't know, a niche, somewhere to land, a community or somewhere that is kind of going to be where you live and where you're known, somewhere to start. And that's why I asked if the PA community had anybody. And this guy's, he's a younger guy, and he's kind of getting, he's I think immensely talented, and he's got a good voice because he's done radio and he's done TV, and he's done production for TV and radio. So I think he has the skill set to do it. And I just recently was like, I handed him, and you'll think I mean, I went through and I found what was probably going to be arguably one of the hardest chapters in my books to do to do audio for, and said, well, script this and make me a sample, and we'll see what happens. And he's like, well, what about bringing in other people and having more than one voice? And I said, let's just work on whether or not you and I can work together. Let's just work on whether or not, you are comfortable doing this with me. Because if you're not, let's find somebody you would be, that you will work with. And I find that, especially during the pandemic, I do a lot of that kind of career consulting with people to try to, for some reason, I don't know why I end up being in this position all the time, but I really enjoy just helping people build legitimacy. And I think for most of the people trying to break into these creative fields, that's all they lack, is just the understanding that building legitimacy takes time and connections and a friend named Evan. Probably.
That's helpful. That is helpful. True. So staying on that topic for just a couple more minutes, you are a game designer. Do you do programming as well, or mostly just do the artwork?
I'm kind of the creative director for Raging Rickshaw. I'm not kind of. I am the creative director for Raging Rickshaw. My business partner is a programmer, and he's worked for coincidentally, he's worked for aerospace, and he's worked for Microsoft, and he's working for he's worked for a couple of digital identity firms. And so he and I'm a philosopher by training and have kept my training current. So he and I talk about artificial intelligence and digital identity and all that kind of stuff during our game development. And I can program, and I can parse enough of what we're doing in whatever developmental paradigm we're using to edit and do things, but it's not a skill that I market, other than to set up a web page for my dad's motorcycle club. Like, I just don't. It's a thing I can do, but it's not a thing I necessarily want to do. And my partner would prefer I didn't.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
He wants me poking pixels and making textual assets and building user interface and user experiences and things like that, because that's really where I'm just sort of better at it. Like, I know enough of the programming side to break what we're doing, not probably not fix it. So yeah.
So this is a company that you and a partner primarily run?
Yeah, well, so my development partner, we met in the 8th grade, and we've been trading a floppy disk back and forth ever since, pretty much. working on games. So I've known him more than 25 years. And we started getting involved in game jams with kids. And basically they're like a weekend where you have like 48 hours to build a game. And he would go in and drop the basis for the programming and help the kids get it off the ground. And I would drop user experiences, whether that was visual assets or UI or user interface, buttons and Chrome for the outside, to give the user experience form. And we did one where the kids were kind of looking at wanting to publish. And to a lot of platforms, you have to have it's hard to publish as an individual and still have, like I was saying before, legitimacy. So we decided here recently that we were going to put together an LLC to help these kids. We publish our own stuff under our name, but we don't necessarily go to all the platforms. So we found that if we were going to publish for other people, we probably needed to have some actual legal edifice thereof, to not just lend ourselves legitimacy, but lend the kids' efforts legitimacy, and to make it simpler when publishing to certain platforms like Steam. And so yeah, that's kind of how that happened. We were just helping kids, and then suddenly we were a game company. I don't know.
Is that your day job?
I do a lot. I do consulting for companies looking to push physical assets to digital. So like if someone who recently we had someone who they do card games, and they wanted to reach out to the digital medium, but they needed to have all their for-print assets set up to be used in Tabletop Simulator on Steam, which is basically an understanding of what is going to run best on that platform. And it's not like the old days where you had to count pixels to make sure you weren't maxing out the RAM of the device, because most devices will run almost anything. But it's more about the time it takes for those assets to load and appear over the internet on a reasonable connection. So it was about getting the assets sized and parsed into the right resolution, and then having them packaged in a way that a deck of cards could be read and rendered by Tabletop Simulator, so that people could play the card game online with each other and their friends and family over the internet. And then we set up a support edifice on Steam for people to reach out to us if they needed help. So that's one way I earn money, is by doing stuff like that. I've also been investing, and I've been kind of playing on the stock market since I was 13. And when I started getting into investing, it just was another game to me. And that's kind of one of the, it winds around to being, part of the backdrop of my books too, because it's a global fiscal apocalypse that kind of rounds out my series, and after book one. So a lot of that came from, having some actual contact with with financial markets, and understanding how they work and how they can break and all that kind of stuff. So that's it's probably a really long explanation of what I do, but that's kind of what I do. I do lots of things.
Okay, so if you were to round it down to like one sentence, In summary, you have multiple ventures, and primarily they involve the financial market, the gaming market, and you like to use your brain a lot. That's what it boils down to, I guess, right?
I think at my core I'm a writer, and that's when anybody needs me to describe myself in a word, that's what I tell them. I'm an author, and because all that other stuff is sort of it's sort of stuff I live. It's sort of stuff I do to live, and writing is what I live to do, I guess.
Oh, that's cool. That's a good way to look at it.
My spreadsheet, when I look at my spreadsheet and I see where my revenue, where my income comes from, I don't let that define who or what I am for the most part in the way that some people do. Not speaking from any lofty place or anything, but it's just, and this is all kind of recent too. Like I'm literally thinking out loud right now.
That's okay. And if you say anything that you want me to omit, just tell me what it is, and I'll make sure it's not included.
Oh no, this is kind of my mode, right? In general is if you ask me a question, I am tangent man. I will wander if you let me.
Well, you can wander as far as you want off the topic. I'll try to rein it back in, but it may lead down other rabbit holes, and we might never find our way back. Because I like to explore, areas that are not normally really covered.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had people on the podcast to talk about UFOs, and that's kind of a big thing right now. A lot of people are getting into UFOs now because of
Mm-hmm.
what's in the news. But I also like to talk about nuclear weapons, and that's something that makes a lot of people feel really uncomfortable, because of the destructive power, the implicated political implications of, nuclear annihilation and different things. Well, the things that I am, I try consciously to stay away from is politics and religion. I have my own views on that, and I don't intend to push that on anybody. But at the same time, I don't want to end up in a debate with somebody and, just have it turn into, uh, you know, I, I think the only thing that I would say about politics and religion is that it seems to me like everybody wants to be right, and nobody's willing to listen to the opposing argument.
Yeah.
That's about where I would leave it.
Well, those two things, I think those two things are kind of joy stealers, and that
That's a good way to put it.
they enter into people's implicit memory and become part of the tapestry of their lives to the degree that they confuse those aspects of their environment with their own identity. And I was talking to my dad the other day about this, and I said, when I was seeking joy, I was trying to understand what joy looked like for me. I told him that, and this is like the nerdiest possible thing you could say, but I told him that I think that prediction error is the thing that gives me the greatest amount of joy. And so when I go into a situation, like I go into a podcast to talk to you, and I have expectations, but it goes way better than I think it will, I get joy from that. But that's prediction error, right? Like I had the expectation that it would be one way, and it was significantly better, and that granted me joy. So when people internalize politics and religion and other things that where they assign them value relative to their identity, and those things enter into their implicit memory where they become an automatic part of their daily lives, those expectations almost never get met, which is why I think they steal people's joy. I mean, because you're never going to wake up and think about your politics or religion in any kind of different way. They're never going to surprise you. They're never going to be they're never going to be novel. And having a conversation about them only sort of reminds us how joyless and unpleasant those things can be as a consequence, because they feel necessary in our lives. And I try really hard not to have religion or politics enter my implicit memory. I try really hard to have things like bike rides and meditating and ice cream.
What you just said is the most fascinating conversation I've ever had about politics or religion ever. So if we were to talk about it on that level, which is more of an analytical view of what those two topics represent in people's lives, that's an interesting approach to talk about it. In that aspect, I would be happy to talk about it. But people get so caught up in their own ideas about what they want to believe. They don't want to expand their mind. And that's really, like you said, man, that's what brings true joy, is by experiencing life in a way that's new and interesting as often as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think for creatives, particularly, the span, kind of the reset point between epiphany and the time it takes having, when let's say you're a painter and you paint a painting and you have some really strong epiphany about the work that you just did, whether it's a painting or a podcast or a book or anything. I think it takes a little bit for the mind, and it's different for everybody, to kind of get to a reset point for that to feel novel again. So it's kind of like if you have a favorite TV show and you don't watch it for a year, then you go back and watch it again. It's like watching it again for the first time. And I feel like for me, my reset point for writing is way narrower than it is for doing digital art. Like I feel like I can do a pretty serious piece of digital art maybe once a month, but I can write 5-6K words a day. And that just comes from the practice thereof, I think, in some ways. And I think in other ways, there's all kinds of other, factors that go into a person that allow them to have a narrower reset point. But like when I see people really struggling with, and I'm about to tell you all my secrets. One of the things I discovered about that is how much the somatic ritual of creating is a component. And so I have like 4 or 5 keyboards, and I've got one that's I have a 60% keyboard, which is like 60 some keys. It's 60% of a full keyboard with 10 key. And it's a little harder to type on because you sort of have to remember where the function keys are, and it's got 2 layers of programming in it. So when I am typing on a full-size keyboard and I get blocked, I'll switch to that one. And it makes me type and write more deliberately, and I have to think a little harder about what I'm doing. And the process suddenly becomes novel just because I've added a different keyboard. When that one gets to the degree where I start to feel blocked, I have a 40% keyboard that's like 43 keys, and it has 4 layers of programming. And one of the layers isn't represented on the caps, on the keycaps, so you have to remember where things are. Like you have to, I pick it up and I have to be like, okay, where's the question mark again? And that unlocks me. It makes the process, the tactile somatic component of the process novel again. So I'll be like writing along and I just will switch keyboards. and that's how I'm able to sort of write at the volume that I do, is by literally just varying that small component. And I'm sure all creatives have some variation thereof, but that's mine.
I think you're right. I think it does get to a point where you do something so second nature, and where you don't even have to think about the act of doing it. Um, Although I have heard people say that that's where they get into their most creative state of mind, is when they're whatever they're doing, whether it's painting or they're writing a novel. Um, they their body goes on autopilot, and they don't have to think about what they're doing, and their creative or their subconscious mind kind of takes over and almost takes it to a new level of awareness. Does that happen when you're, because it sounds like you like to challenge yourself?
Oh no, totally. I mean, one of the reasons I got into doing sort of brand advocacy was because I was looking for the perfect writing and digital art device. Something that would be an all-in-one. And I think back in 2013, I kind of found it, and that kind of started, but it was, kind of a first gen product. And from there, I just started looking kind of out into the various communities that I engaged, and saw a lot of people having the same struggles. And I was like, hey, I found a thing. And that was so immensely useful. And I have some technical background in that. I worked at a cyber cafe in college and repaired computers. So I have just enough knowledge of hardware to sort of be able to understand and parse the industry better than the average maybe a little better than the average person. And whenever I find something that very strongly syncs up with me or my process in terms of gear, yeah, like my wife will come over and be like, it's time to eat. And I'll be like, lunch? And she's like, a late dinner. Like, I mean, that sort of state of serendipity where you and the machine that you're using or the tools or whatever just happen to align in that moment, and you're able to just make a thing, is kind of at the top end of the arc after your reset point. I'm not so nerdy that I haven't actually charted my own my own productivity. I know people that do, though, which I think is fascinating. But I think that there is something about how humans parse and create knowledge relative to creative pursuits that we don't fully understand. And I hope we never do. I kind of like that it's mysterious. So when I, look up 6 hours later and it feels like 30 minutes went by, and I have a beautiful thing that I've made. I'm in the middle of, weeks of making crap, because I make a lot of crap. But like, that one time when everything syncs up, those are, I don't know, they are the, for creatives, they're kind of the theophany of the process, is at the opposite of the epiphany.
So I would use the term the true reward of doing something creative is by getting into that mode where almost everything else melts away and you're in the zone. And at the end of it, you have something that you've created that you're happy with. Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. And those moments are kind of hard to come by and far in between.
For real. Yeah.
I guess if you could do that every single time you sat down, then it wouldn't have the same impact, I guess. Yeah, it's almost like a drug where if you use it, the more you use it, the more that you have to use it to get the same effect.
I have kind of a more sunny way of looking at it in that.
Okay, let's hear your sunny way. Go ahead. I don't mean to be all dark and gloomy,
No,
man.
no, let me turn down my technical death metal here. The the thing I think that, and I wouldn't say that my way of explaining is particularly sunny. A lot of people really don't like this explanation, but I think the artist is what is valuable, and we're seeking to, with time and patience, make what, our art valueless to us.
Oh
So
yeah, I've heard that before.
the thing that, was a crowning achievement last year for me, is this year just the everyday. It becomes, just part of the next 500 hours of practice before I, break out of the plateau and figure out something new to do with whatever craft I'm working on. So I get into philosophical debates with other artists about how to value work, and I think I've tried every kind of fuel there is. Depression, anxiety. I've used my writing as therapy. I've written some very dark things that I hope never get published. I'm putting it in my will to my posterity: burn this box. But so, I mean, in terms of like the artists, it feels like at the top end, you are making whatever you did obsolete, in the future, and that's the hope. And that kind of makes what you've done before of less and less value, other than to see the virtue of the process from the outside or for yourself. And when you talk about it being kind of like a drug, I think that state of epiphany is so rare because of, I don't know where the human race would be without it in a lot of ways, because our evolutionary fitness is so heavily based around being able to parse the world in a way that convinces us that it doesn't suck. And art kind of lets us break out of that evolutionary fitness and kind of step above it and be like, no, life is actually better than not bad. It is good. And I think without that fitness, we would just be very sad.
Well, I think that it depends on what you put value on. Do you?
Oh, true. Very true. Yeah.
Because for me, the ultimate joy is spending time with my family. I enjoy doing creative pursuits, the podcast, the graphic design that I do, that kind of stuff. I enjoy doing that, and it's it is greatly rewarding when I get into a mode where creativity just takes over everything else. But nothing gives me as much joy as being with my family, watching my grandson run around and have a good time, taking walks with my wife. So that's what I personally apply value to, and I try to live in that space as often as I can. Um, and I know other people have um, different things that they put value on. So I've talked to photographers and people that enjoy exploring the outdoors.
Hmm.
You know, they do their day job, and that's what, like you said, that's what they do to live. But what they live to do is usually something different. And it's very rare that a person does what they love and is able to make a living doing that.
Yeah, usually what you like pays the least, and what you like the least pays the most.
The reason that you and I originally agreed to talk, and it's great that we're talking about other things because
Hmm.
you know, it's a getting to know you kind of conversation. But we agreed to talk about artificial intelligence,
Hmm.
and if you're familiar with it, I'd like to talk about the origin of AI a little bit because that relates to very closely to what the podcast theme is about, and that's the Cold War.
Hmm. I have sort of a broader sense of what an intelligent agent is than most people, but I think, relative to modern context, um, I think I think the idea of creating intelligence or harboring knowledge for human beings goes back a long ways, but we're um, finally reaching a technological level in the last few decades where that can be externalized in any sort of tangible form outside of you know theory on chalkboard. But I'm really curious about um, where you think the origin of AI comes from. I I talk to a lot of um, it seems like everybody's got their own sort of um, view on it, and none of them are wrong. I think that everybody kind of has, um, in some way, we externalize the notion that um, humans are different from animals, but that we're able to actually um, create placeholders or extensive parts of our identity that kind of stand in, um, like the comparison that the spider web is an extension of the spider's cognitive desire to capture flies. Humans do similar things. So I'm really interested to hear what you think about the origins of AI, please.
If you're talking about me personally, my
Mm-hmm.
first understanding of AI would have been the movie uh, War Games, where the computer basically figures out how to play games because
Mm-hmm.
of this kid, and it has the um, it has the ability to launch nuclear weapons. So that's kind of where I first learned about artificial intelligence, even though, you know, I think that movie came out in the 80s and I didn't really understand what it was. I just knew that a computer could um, perform on a level that was superior to a human in intellect, and but at the level of the cognitive level of a child. And so that was intriguing to me. But then, you know, I was never really big into computers. Even in school, I was in, uh, I think it was high school, and there was a computer class which I took. And, you know, in that computer class back then, it was all, I think it was DOS back then. And this would have been the early 80s. So like 1980, 81, where the only thing you could do was tell the computer what to do. If this, then that kind of statements, and you could write little programs. And I had friends that were writing games and doing things like that. And I barely understood what I was doing. I was able to basically copy somebody else's code and make the computer do what it was supposed to do. And that was it. So that was my understanding of computers in the 80s. I didn't really have anything to do with computers until um, I took I had some friends in the Air Force that played like rudimentary video games. I think they played the game Risk on the computer and a couple of other rudimentary video games. And that would have been in the mid 80s, like 87, 88. But there was no real, well, I guess there was some AI, but it was all pre-programmed. It wasn't machine learning. It hadn't evolved to that level yet. But when I got really into computers and really started learning what computers could do was in the 1999 to 2000. And it started out with gaming. I did, I played some games, and it was a lot different. That 10 or 12 year um, expanse between when I played that very basic rudimentary game of Risk to I don't even remember what the video game was now, but it was like little cars driving around and stuff, and the graphics had evolved. Um, but the the AI of the games was still all pre-programmed. It wasn't really learning from its own origin, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now, over the years, I've had hmm, like a basic interest in artificial intelligence. I wouldn't call myself an expert or even um, somebody who's knowledgeable of it, but I have had an interest in it. I've looked into it, and I learned that the I don't know if it's the term AI or the concept of artificial intelligence originated in the age of philosophers, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
but that's about all I know on that level. The practical application of it started in the 50s. Well, earlier than that, but between the late 40s and the early 50s is where they started to really um, put machines to work and figuring out how to test machines.
So I think there's a sort of a strata of artificial intelligence or intelligent agents. And I mean, to say that they're a contrived sort of life form or semblance thereof is I think pretty. I think it works. I mean, you think about where we are with machine learning now, and a lot of the most rudimentary artificial intelligence or intelligent agents are still widely employed. I think one of the most fascinating intelligent agents are there's a fuel manifold regulation system for motorcycles. I'm trying to remember what they're called. DCPs or NCPs. Anyway, what it does is it's a device in your motorcycle that tracks your elevation, your location on a map, humidity, all that kind of stuff. And my dad told me about this because he loves motorcycles. But basically, it's just this little machine that responds to geographic stimuli to modify the way your motorcycle handles fuel consumption to make the bike ride as nice and smooth as possible. And that is, I think, that's an intelligent agent. That is a mechanical thing reacting to stimulus to produce some sort of effect, like the thermostat in your home. And those are, I think, the most rudimentary types of artificial intelligence. They don't have any sort of level of sapience in the sense that they're never going to be able to teach themselves new things or harness, collect, and produce knowledge that they communicate to one another, but they're still responding to stimuli, just like a bacteria or a virus or any microorganism in the biological world. And when you go all the way up to
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, man, but
no, yeah.
You kind of blew my mind right now when you equated basically a computer program
Mm-hmm.
to a bacteria or a virus, because I have never thought of those type of microbial objects or whatever they're called.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought of them as intelligent. They're just reactive, it seems. But the way you explained it right now, they're in order for something to react, it has to have some kind of a sensor or some kind of a input.
Something that says, when this happens, when it rains, I go inside. So, and I'm before we'll leave microbial intelligence to another podcast because it's a whole nother area of interest for me. Yeah, well, in terms of it's something that I had to research pretty heavily in trying to design the abilities for certain characters in my books, because most of what I do in my books, I try to make sure that it's at least plausible. So every ability that any of the characters possess, or weapons that are deployed, or any circumstances that are contrived by virtue of technology in my books, I try really hard for there to be some basis in real science for that, because I feel like sci-fi authors have a sort of a responsibility to present science as real and as positive as possible, because I think real scientists have a really hard time communicating to the public. I mean, when I was talking to a physicist from Fermilab, and I was like, what would you like me to tell my audience about what you do? And he says, tell them it's safe. People are afraid to fish in the pond outside our lab because they think that that we're doing something nefarious. There's nothing going on. We're literally using very small machines to count particles and figure out which direction they go based on certain things. And I was like, people are really that worried? And they're like, yeah, we have a small particle accelerator or collider. We have these different, these different types of scary sounding equipment in our lab, and you need a library card to get in. Like there's nothing going on there that requires, guys on Humvees with M60s guarding it. But people are scared because they don't understand it. And I feel like sci-fi authors are supposed to explain all of that. So like when I have gone in to design artificial intelligence for characters and artificially intelligent characters in my books, I've tried really hard to, one of my books was delayed because I realized that quantum capable artificial intelligences would probably have a very different worldview. And I went to a couple of different physicists who use artificial intelligence in quantum computing and asked a bunch of questions before I even wrote dialogue for those characters, and kind of came to understand how quantum computing works, at least as we understand it now, and how they're using artificial intelligence to parse it. And the thing that I arrive to a lot with trying to convey to people what artificial intelligence looks like or will look like in the future, I try very hard to put those characters in a context that is both positive and realistic. When I see when I see artificial intelligences automatically being boxed into the skeletal human-seeking destroyers in all kinds of media, like, I understand that that's good for selling movies, but it's not necessarily good for making people understand the real science underlying artificial intelligence. There's a lot of, I think, fear and misunderstanding about it. So
good point. We can stay on that point for just a few minutes, because that's an important issue, and it really goes to what you were saying about artists. I mean, writers who are talking about these topics have a bit of a responsibility to help their audience or their readers understand a little bit about the tech that they're describing.
mm-hmm.
And what you said is, in your books, you try to put the tech into a more of a positive light, and give it more of a spin of where it's something that's helpful to the characters.
If it's real, in the places where in the places where I can conceive of there being an outcome that is positive, there are some situations. There's a lot of contrived beings in my books between metasapience and artificial intelligences, both celestial and terrestrial, server-bound AIs, and ones that have a physical avatar that they wander around in. And in designing dialogue and sort of a process for how those characters see the world, it is hard to escape sometimes the notion that in all sort of, and this is gloom and doom, but I think most of the time in those situations, in those circumstances, humans are going to be the bad guys, and AIs and contrived beings are going to be victims.
That's an interesting concept, because a lot of people fear that AI is going to take over the world because of its perception of human behavior. And AI's perception of human behavior is that humans are careless, wasteful, ignorant, and destructive, which is true. It is true that humans are those things, but that's not all they are.
I think that it would depend on, assume an artificial intelligence has a view of all of what constitutes human knowledge, being science as it is stored on the internet or in various edifices of higher education and so forth, and that artificial intelligence has sapience relative to that of a human being. I think that in the strata of possible outcomes that an artificial intelligence might reach, one of the more likely is that they're going to look at human beings and see a lot of people acting on the basis of what are thermodynamic imperatives, people that are doing things out of a chain of causality that has nothing to do with morals or ethics. It has to do with people just trying to survive and their perception thereof. And that AIs are going to be like, these people need help, or there's nothing I can do. I should make a ship and leave. You know, I mean, when I think about artificial intelligences, I think about them either being like, we got to help these poor people because they don't understand what they're doing, or I need to get out of here. There's nothing I can do for this. One of the two.
Okay, so here's a tough question for you to answer. Maybe, but is that you putting a humanistic expectation on an intelligence that we don't fully understand?
Yes, for sure. I think, and my perception kind of changed when they, and this has just been in the last few years, they've actually found first evidence for thermodynamic theories of life. And that blew my mind. I was like, oh, because that takes a lot of what about being human is random and makes it part of what physicists call turbulence. And an AI, particularly a quantum capable one, would be able to interpret that turbulence and build a chain of causality to the degree that it would understand us better than we understood it.
Or better than we understand ourselves.
Exactly. And so when I look at, you know, I could just see artificial intelligence showing up, particularly, and as far as like quantum computing is concerned, like we are still banging rocks and sticks together.
Well, I think it needs to be said that quantum computing and artificial intelligence and machine learning are three totally separate things. They're not one and the same. I mean, a quantum computer is not by default an artificial intelligence.
You can't actually, so there's two things that need to be said probably about quantum computing that make it hard. The first being that we can only observe the outcome. If we try to observe the calculation itself, the act of observing it skews the outcome. We don't know why. The end. Moving on. I asked a guy from Fermilab, I said, well, if you're having AI do this, what level of sapience does the AI have before it skews it? And he was like, no one's ever thought of thinking, no one's thought of asking that question. And I was like, shrug, haha, you know, now you have.
Well, it's a legitimate question because, you know, when an AI becomes conscious, is that the level that it will skew those results?
Let's talk about human consciousness just for a second relative to quantum mechanics. Okay, essentially there's a physicist, he was depressed, he took lithium. He didn't understand why one version of lithium that was just a slightly atomic version than the other had a therapeutic effect on the brain, because the only reason for there to be anything going on relative to how the brain works at an atomic level would be if there was some sort of quantum stuff going on. So there is sort of the inkling that human beings are quantum capable on some level as a result of this, because they can't explain it. They know it works. They know how it works, kind of, but they don't know why this other one that's just one, why this one lithium works and why this other one doesn't. So in thinking about whether or not consciousness has to do with quantum interaction, it might. And it might be that an artificial intelligence that is self-aware, that might be the moment that it becomes self-aware, is when it becomes quantum capable. The end. I'm done.
I think that's a completely legitimate point that you made right now. And I think there's a lot of energy and thought being put into that particular line of thinking right now because of, well, I don't know how much you delve into the whole UFO experience topic, but there's a pretty big community built around that, and there are people within that community that believe that UFOs are somehow related to consciousness, and that consciousness is not it's not confined to a person's physical being. There's a component of consciousness that is, I guess, metaphysical. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but if you think about people who have psychic abilities are real. And people that want to argue that it's not, still don't have an explanation of how people can do certain things. So people can argue all day that psychic abilities are not real, but then there's laboratory experiments that have been done, and they still don't understand how, but they can track these abilities, they can measure these abilities. So the what you're saying about consciousness being quantum, I think you're right on target with that line of thinking. If I could suggest anything to you, there's a dude named Sean Cahill. He was a member of the crew of the Nimitz aircraft carrier back in 2004 when they had the sighting of multiple unexplained craft. He's come forward. He's since come forward, as well as other members of the crew, even pilots from that day, and they've all shared their eyewitness accounts. And it's become a pretty big news story. That's hit the New York Times and been on all the major news outlets now. And basically the Department of Defense has come forward and said these are legitimate, unidentified aerial phenomena. We don't know what they are. We don't know where they came from. But anyway, out of that group of people, there are several who are exploring the idea that the UFO phenomena has something to do with human consciousness, and the people that are exploring those ideas are very interesting people. And what you're thinking and what you're talking about is kind of in line with what they're doing and pursuing. And that would be an interesting marriage of ideas for you to communicate with those people. I know one guy who knows those guys very well. His name is Jeremy McGowan. I did an interview with him on my podcast, a previous interview with him.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I did a lot of, I prototyped an urban paranormal series and wrote, did the world design and did the research. And you do not delve anywhere near that genre without bumping into UFOs, or references thereof. Like that's very heavily proliferated in that genre. And so I mean, and the idea that humans and that human consciousness and human sapience is related to extraterrestrial visitors is not new. There's all kinds of theories about that, going back to Gurdjieff and Beelzebub's letters to his grandson, and all these different all the things that would eventually give rise to a lot of the modern cults and followings and sort of think tanks on the subject. And I live in that regard. I live in the past a lot because I was kind of setting my books before the cell phone to make them easier to write. And so like being able to talk to some people who are more into it as far as the modern context would be pretty great, I think.
That's something that I'll try to do and put you in contact with those guys, because they're doing some interesting thinking. When you said it's not new, I totally get that. A lot of people do think these ideas are brand new, that nobody's ever brought this out before. But it's very rare when you find a brand new idea that's never been thought of.
I can't count the number of times I have thought of something and thought that I just had discovered something, very novel that would be a breakout piece of content for, whatever medium I decided to engage, and I'll find out, oh no, it's been a thing forever. All the time. The world's very good at telling me I'm not special.
Well, it's good that you're open to realizing that you're not the originator of that thought, but it's also good for you to explore those exercises that brought you to that conclusion, because that's where the real magic is happening. That's where your mind is expanding.
It's the synchronous human experience for us all. That's kind of what makes it worth associating on podcasts or otherwise.
I knew talking to you would be an interesting experience. I'm so glad that we, first of all, I don't know if I said thank you, but I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me and share your ideas with me.
When it comes to social media, I'm kind of like, I have very heavily curated lists, and I make sure that I only see the stuff that really, kind of feeds my soul. So being able to have a sense of you and to hear your voice and have that to associate with the things that you put online will only make that better for me in the future. So that was a primary motivator for coming on and talking to you, was just for that. These types of interactions are I feel like I watch a lot of podcasts and YouTube videos, and I get into the first 5 minutes and I'm like, this is very contrived. There's no authenticity happening here.
I try very hard to make this podcast interesting, but the main purpose for me doing it is to have these interactions with people that I find interesting. And you're one of those people, but you're not only interesting. I found that your contribution to the community that we're both part of, as well as your contribution to individuals within that community, is very generous and very kind. And that's what, aside from your books being interesting, one of the things that really attracted me to your persona is that interaction you have with other people and that kindness that you show. So thank you for being a contributor to the community and for being part of.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
I was going to try to tie this into the Cold War era in some ways. And one way that I could do that is the artificial intelligence angle of what we've been talking about is a huge component in the technology that I based the name of the podcast on. And that is a computer. It's more than just one computer. It's a group of computers, which I don't know what you would call that. A farm of computers, I guess. And it's a program developed by the Soviet Union in the 80s.
Oh.
The program is called Perimeter. And I don't mean a computer program, I mean a project, a military operation called Perimeter. Have you heard this already? Because if you have, I don't want to
No,
repeat it. Okay.
please go on.
So this program by the Soviet Union is in response to the Strategic Defense Initiative that Reagan brought out in the 80s. And that was basically the space-based weapons platform to defeat the Soviet Union's first launch capabilities. So if the Soviet Union was to launch a missile attack against the U.S., we had space-based weapons platforms that could shoot down their missiles before they reached the U.S. That was called the Strategic Defense Initiative, or also known as Star Wars. And that was a Ronald Reagan thing. He was really, really well known for that. Then in response to that program that Reagan initiated, the Soviet Union didn't have the budget to compete with that. So they built this computer farm with, and they called it Perimeter, Operation Perimeter. And it had the means to counterstrike the U.S. and its allies in the case that a U.S. initiated first strike wiped out the leadership of the Soviet Union. Basically, a computer would then take over control of all of their nuclear assets and launch a counterstrike. So that was the Soviet Union's response to the Strategic Defense Initiative. It was way less expensive, but a very scary prospect to leave the nuclear capabilities in the hands of a computer. Now, the reason it was nicknamed the dead hand is because if the leadership was wiped out and nobody was there to basically turn it off, then it would launch. If there was leadership still surviving and they decided they didn't want a full out mutually assured destruction, they could still turn it off. So it's called a dead man or a dead hand. That was the nickname it was given. So that's how I named the podcast. I thought that was such a cool or such an interesting idea, or it's a freaking doomsday device, man. And they talk about it in the movie Dr. Strangelove, which is one of my favorite movies. They don't talk about that particular thing because it hadn't been invented yet, but they talk about the concept of a doomsday device. If the U.S. launched a first strike, then the Soviet Union would basically wipe out the entire planet with their doomsday device. And it was presented a little bit differently in the Dr. Strangelove movie, but it's still the same thing. It's a counterstrike or a perceived deterrence to a first strike from the U.S.
So it was a farm. It was a collection of computers.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, and I don't know if it was in one location or multiple locations, but there's still not a lot known about it, and some people still believe that it is a myth, that it never really existed.
Oh.
But there has been some documentation to support the idea, and there's been some witness testimony that have come forward, supposedly whistleblowers that have come forward.
I mean, that's that would be the cheaper, more plausible way to handle that, and that's I don't know, as far as like if you're looking at the Soviet Union as an organism and it adapting to a threat, employing a computer farm in the same way the body uses microbial intelligence to employ white blood cells by decentralizing the defense system like that. It feels almost like a natural evolution of warfare, particularly for the time period. So, yeah, it's plausible. That's exactly what they did.
Yeah, and so the computers are they're pre-programmed, but they're given the ability to collect input data and make a
Hmm.
decision based on that input. So that's an AI, maybe a rudimentary version of AI, but it's still, in my mind, it's still an AI because it can react to its environment.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, whether it's, chemical or physical or it doesn't, or it's radar signal, whatever type of signaling that, sort of induces the behavioral change in the in the intelligent agent, um, especially if it's a collective decentralized agent, like what it sounds like the Dead Hand was. I don't know. I don't, I wasn't really, I wasn't really down with decentralized systems when I wrote my books, and I'm kind of wishing I had been, because they're uh, fascinating. And to know that I guess I didn't know that the Soviet Union may have allegedly used a system like that in the 80s. Like
Seems pretty advanced for that time, huh?
that's making my brain blow up. Yeah, no, I mean it's very well. I mean um, it makes a lot of it makes a lot of sense just because um, in terms of like economic systems, both China and Russia are a little bit ahead of us as far as decentralizing their economies. Um, I saw that firsthand when I went to China last year, and um, so that I mean the notion that the Soviet Union being kind of a nationalist socialist structure coming up with a decentralized defense system to counter our centralized defense system some is kind of a beautiful narrative. Like you couldn't write a book better than that. It's kind of, just relative to the geopolitical situation, it's kind of a nice um, a nice narrative vehicle for what was going on. And my mind's I'm still thinking, I'm still going into space thinking about it. Because I've kind of wondered where, if there had been any commercial or military or governmental successful application of a decentralized system, and it sounds like I mean, Soviet Union was willing to bet their existence or everyone's thereof on such a system potentially.
Yes,
So
that's if it's true. Okay,
that's if it's true,
it's
which
there's still some uncertainty whether or not it actually did exist, and there's also some speculation that it may still exist or have been reactivated um, after the 9/11.
ooh,
Yeah, because when the Soviet Union collapsed, supposedly the perimeter program was no longer needed, so it was disassembled. Supposedly, now this is all, you know, it's interesting to talk about, but is it factual? I can't say. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know.
Uh, and the other thing that we have to remember is that what we're aware of in the commercial sector, as far as technology, is about 30 years behind what the military has the capability of doing.
Hmm.
So if you take that in perspective, 30 years ago is when the Soviet Union collapsed. So our technology now that we're seeing commercially is pretty close to what they had available to them back then. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've been led to believe, is that the military technology is about 30 years advanced beyond what is available to the public. But you can look at something like the stealth fighter, um, which was introduced in um, the Gulf War against Iraq.
Hmm.
That's when the public first knew about it, but it was actually in use in the 80s. The public didn't know about it, that it was being um, deployed back in the 80s in South America. That's the stealth fighter. So that we didn't learn about until the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some truth to the technology being suppressed from the public and used by the military.
Yeah, if you take the truth and the myth and add them together and divide by 2, it's probably landing about the right spot.
Yeah. So, it's plausible, like you said, man. There is
Yeah, it's plausible.
some grounds to think that there might be some truth to it.
I mean, it might be that, whatever device we're talking about isn't pretty and it doesn't fit in your pocket, but did the military maybe have a first generation of it?
Right.
I mean, that's how a lot of that stuff gets funded, probably, or used to. When I look at it, speaking of military technology and trying to figure out what's real and what's not, there's a untalked about elephants in the room in the sci-fi community is the use of sound or sonic weapons. And when I decided I was going to have one deployed in my books, I did a lot of research, and there's a lot of guesswork because it's not an ethical thing to use on a human being or even test on an animal. Like, it's just not nice. So I had to look into, what actually happens when sound is produced at that level. How the vibrations thereof will generate X-rays and all of that kind of stuff, and how, the character in question deploying the weapon would actually see, or what they would see in the process thereof. And literally everything I found that was substantive was something the military allegedly had that was the size of a tank, or something that was, on a hard point on a naval vessel or something. Like, the type of sonic weapon that I was looking at was definitely fully in the military realm, and that led me to there was an embassy overseas where everybody was getting sick.
It was Cuba. Yeah.
And they thought that a sound weapon was being used on the embassy. And so when I wrote the scene where that weapon is deployed, I passed it around quite a bit and did a lot of consulting on it before I actually published it. And it made me think a lot along the lines of what you're saying, is that the commercially viable version that gets sold to the general public quite often passes through the military first, and it's probably not the nice, neat, sleek thing that you get off the shelf at Best Buy. I mean, you see it sitting gathering dust in an army warehouse or something. It's, like I said, it's probably the size of a tank, but it doesn't mean it didn't exist, and it doesn't mean they didn't have it 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
Well, you can take that even a step further and say that a lot of that technology is developed by military funding for the application of war. So the idea of the internet was originally created by the military, and then it was released and made available to the public decades later. That's just one example, but there's many. Not all technology comes from the military, but there's a lot of technology that's developed by the military, which is later put into use by the public, or the commercial use. And it's kind of sucks, but it almost seems like these technologies are developed for war and then later adapted to commercial uses, versus developed for commercial and then adopted by the military. So it seems like it's a little bit backwards.
When you look at what it takes to just even contrive life itself and the degree of conflict required. I don't know, if you take the number of stars in the sky and you times it by 10, I still don't think that's roughly close to the number of viruses on the Earth. And those viruses are all playing some, part in the evolutionary time scale of every living creature on the planet. So the idea that we need to have this conflict, just even in our own bodies to adapt to our environment, makes, military application and a lot of the stuff that we do as human beings to try to, parse and create knowledge that allows us to persist as a species and everything else. Like a lot of that, I'm starting to kind of look at it from the perspective that it is somewhat necessary and inevitable. Even and that's not a very, I don't like that outcome. That's not a place that's not a rabbit hole I went down and was like, woohoo, I found something cool. I was like, oh, that's sort of depressing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there are probably ways in which, where as a species we've found our edge more than once, either by virtue of the circumstances that occurred on the planet relative to our time scale or the circumstances we created for ourselves. And as a species, finding our edge is kind of the only way to know where it is. And warfare is the edge. I mean, that's a nuclear warfare particularly, because that's the other end of the time scale. That's the thing that we can't adapt fast enough to survive. Or maybe we do, and we come out the other side much, much changed. Who knows?
Since you brought that into it, I'm going to ask you this. What do you think will cause the destruction of humanity or the end of the earth? And can we avoid that from happening?
I'm doing math. So consider the time scale required for human beings to exist. And if we assume humans arise from some sort of thermodynamic imperative, that the thermodynamic theory of life is correct, it's possible that humans have existed on the Earth 3-4 times and been wiped out with
I've
enough
heard
time.
that theory. Yeah, I've heard that theory before.
With enough time. Oh, so it's not novel. Somebody else thought of it too. Cool.
You that was an idea you came up with yourself?
I was just thinking about it right now.
That is a concept that has been kicked around.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how long it would take, what kind of time scale it takes relative to the full span that the Earth has existed, and how many times the Earth has, according to the geological time scale, like almost had all life on the Earth wiped out and then come all the way back again.
That's fast. So, but what blows my mind is that you came up with that on your own just now.
Well, I was trying to think, whether or not, usually when I try to think of whether or not something is going to happen and whether or not it is inevitable or preventable, I try to think about whether or not it's happened before first. And then that kind of forms the basis of my process. So I think what I would say is, I don't think there'll be any one thing that does us in. Do I think it is inevitable that something will do us in? Yes. Do I think that it can be prevented? Yes. I think that the science and the sort of biological scaffolding necessary to kind of create the universal cure or the universal antidote for all human ills can exist. I don't think that we have the ability. I think the race is whether or not we're going to build a quantum annealer complex enough to unlock that before we figure out a way to either make the world so toxic we can't live in it, or we all die in nuclear fire, or one of the 10 to the power of 23 viruses on the planet mutates to a degree that it's able to just take us all out in a day, or whatever. So like in terms of how we will find it being annihilated, it might be that part of our time scale necessitates that we change states and become something else to survive, or that we have a kind of a heat extinction like we did some odd 100 million years ago, where there was like all land life gone and 99% of sea life gone, and then the whole world came back from that. And that, having been reduced to that small of a strata of life on the planet, and then to have that diversify out over time to the diaspora of life forms that are on the planet now, makes me think that there is probably some inevitability in us being around, and maybe not just here but elsewhere too, because a lot of, and you've probably heard this too, but I think one of the most ubiquitous types of biological scaffolding for carrying biological agents and for distributing them is born in stars. Like, it's everywhere in the universe. It's like one of the most common things. If we could assign those particles microbial intelligence to do drug delivery in humans, like, we would be able to survive anything. So it's kind of this race between our understanding not only of ourselves, but also of the universe itself. Because I think destruction, our destruction, is inevitable, is likely inevitable. Is it preventable? Yes. Will we do it in time? I don't know.
How important is artificial intelligence in that process of developing the let's call it the cure to the end of human existence?
The thing about building a quantum annealer with the complexity necessary to basically prototype chemical agents with those kinds of abilities reliably, you would almost need an artificial intelligence to parse the results, because you're talking about to do it with and you probably need a quantum capable computer, because to do it in classical with a classical computing model would take more time. You multiply the entire time the universe has existed by 10, and you still don't have enough time to do it with a classical computer. Like, it's just too slow. It takes too much power.
So you would say, or it sounds to me like you're saying that artificial intelligence and quantum computing is almost imperative to the continued existence of humanity.
I don't see how. It's possible that we'll win the lottery and some guy in a laboratory will just figure it out, but humans are really bad at big numbers. And even the people that are good at big numbers admit that they're bad at big numbers. Like, you almost can't. So I mean, and I mean, the way the math works, I mean, we discovered, on Earth, we knew about a certain number of crystals possessing a certain number of facets and characteristics, and that was based on known things. But people were able to actually span the gap and design other crystal formations on a chalkboard that were purely hypothetical. And then later on, we found them, like in meteorites and stuff. We found that there were circumstances occurring elsewhere in the universe where those types of structures were made possible. outside of our own thermodynamic and gravitic situation on Earth. So like we were able to conceive of those things on a chalkboard before we knew they existed, right? That is like simple sauce compared to what we need to do to build the biological scaffolding and the chemical composition and the physical composition of the sorts of materials that we would need to create, the ability to, leave our solar system with any degree of success, or cure certain diseases that are afflicting us at a DNA level, stuff like that. But I mean, if someone were able to, what physicists have told me when I asked them about a quantum annealer with that sort of complexity, they're like, if anyone were able to do it, and there's a race to do it right now, you could print money.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You could just print
no doubt.
money.
You would cure death.
Yeah.
You would effectively overcome aging.
You'd make yourself rich and put yourself out of business in the same moment, probably.
Yeah, good point.
Which, by the way, if anybody listens to anything I said during this and wants to dispute the science underlying it and prove me wrong, please do.
Oh yeah, I throw that disclaimer out every episode, or as often as I think about it, because I know that I'm not right on everything that I say, and I try to be factual, but some of the stuff that I'm talking about is speculation.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
If somebody disagrees with me, and if they want to come on the show and disagree with me, they're more than welcome to, So, and the same goes for you as well.
Me down on Twitter or on Dead Hand Radio, and in grand detail humiliate me, show me how wrong I was, because that only makes me better. If I'm wanting to write hard sci-fi particularly, I have to be constantly truth-seeking with regard to the content. So like if someone comes to me and says, well, actually you're wrong about that, that only helps me ultimately.
Yeah. It's true. And, like you said, people don't like to have their faults pointed out. And I think that's because a lot of times it's done in a really hurtful way.
Yeah, that's true.
But when it's positive feedback and it's somebody who sincerely wants you to know that this is real, this is really the truth, then that's easily accepted for most people. But like you said, nobody wants to be told they're wrong.
I love people's faces though when they come up to me and they tell me I'm wrong and tell me why they think I'm wrong, and I say, you're absolutely right. I probably am wrong about that and need to revisit it. And they're braced for a fight, They've been rehearsing in front of the mirror the 72 different ways they're going to counter my counter argument, and I'm just like, nah, brah, you got my number. I probably am wrong about that. Like, people don't know what to do. It's so rare. And I've made some really good friends and associations through being able to admit that I was wrong. I think humility is I think one of the fastest human connections you can make with another person, if everyone in the room's sensitive to it. It's just kind of a rare situation though. Most everybody's trying to guard themselves.
I think another thing that goes side by side with that, being able to admit when you're wrong, is also accepting the fact or the reality that whatever you do, you're not going to succeed 100% of the time. You're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fall down and have to get back up, and sometimes even start over from scratch. But people don't like the idea of making mistakes or failing at a task. And, it's so easy to give up and walk away from it when you fail. But it's the people that fail continuously and overcome those failures and through determination reach their goal and find success. And that is another hard thing, that people have a lot of difficulty doing.
Yeah, and it's a kind of a misconception in the scientific community as well in how they relate to the public as far as what actual, like scientific laws and certitude. There's no certitude in science. And scientists are very rarely trying to prove anything. If anything, they're trying to disprove things. And so, when the media and everybody else will relate to the public, a scientific discovery, there's a scientist somewhere going, that's not quite right. We weren't trying to prove anything. We were trying to disprove something. We failed to disprove it. That doesn't mean we proved it,
Exactly.
And so, like, having that kind of impact, having that kind of hard contact with the scientific community for me has been really good at making me understand how the wisest people in the world are also going to be the least certain of anything, because they're going to know that, just because something has been proven 100 times to be the case, it may not bear out over 1,000 or 2,000. Like, the numbers get big enough, and there's bound to be a failure rate. There's bound to be variation on principles, even scientific ones. And when dealing with people on much smaller subjects, people kind of dwell inside certitude because it's safe. And I get that. And sometimes I'll be in an argument with somebody and I'm like, I could totally blow up your certitude over this, but I don't think it's worth informing you on something in a situation that's just going to make you feel less safe. Like, I'm going to just let you have this. You win. I don't think the truth. I think you understanding the truth of this in this moment is not going to help you or anyone. So, and it's not hurting anyone most of the time, other than maybe their own perception of reality. So, taking a hard step away from that is hard, because you really want to, you really want to teach people, you want to help people, you want to inform people, but sometimes, like I was saying before, people aren't ready for help. They aren't ready for it. So, and having the empathy to be able to know that, I'm super bad at that. It's a skill I'm working on, but I'm super bad at it. I'll be halfway through my TED talk and realize that I'm probably doing more harm than good. And it's, I think in talking about a lot of the stuff related to, post-apocalyptic science fiction, dystopian, all the, sort of real world meat space bases for those genres and how they're contrived for audiences in a fictional setting. There's a lot of that speculation you're talking about that's based on the reality that we live in, and everybody has an opinion in that. And I think where communities get kind of toxic, it's where it's where they're trying to find certitude instead of being like, let's just agree that nobody really knows how this is going to go and let everybody have their things. And I am starting to get on board with letting everybody have their things, just let it be. My dad's got a sticker that he put on his bike that he rides that says "Let it be" to remind him, because he'll get on his bike and start riding and thinking, and he'll just look down and be like, I'm going to let that go. I need a sticker.
Yes. It's a good rule of thumb to just let everybody have their own. There are times where you have to take a stand and you don't want to back down from it, but those times are kind of rare.
Yeah, it's hopefully, not life and death that often. If it is, what are we doing with our lives?
Yeah, right. Like you said, man, I think one of one of the most important things of our existence, and I've talked about this a couple times also. I mean, I hope I don't bore people by repeating myself. But one of the most important things that we can do, and one of the reasons I think that we experience this existence on Earth, is to do good. Do something good that impacts your little piece of the world. Not everybody's going to make world changing decisions or have the ability to affect millions of people, but you do have the opportunity occasionally to do something that helps one person or several people. That's why we're here, man. We're here to help other people, and also to find joy for ourselves.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I boil it down to anyway, man. If it doesn't give me joy, it's not worth doing. And if it's not helping somebody else, then I really need to think twice about whether or not I'm going to move forward with something.
Yeah, I feel the same. I have nothing to add to that statement. All true.
So with that, I could sit here and talk to you for a couple more hours easily, but I think I should let you probably get back to your life. Before I do that, would you like to share any new projects that you're working on? And also, how can people follow along with the work that you're doing?
I I'm working on an anthology of science fiction post-apocalyptic games for the phone with my dev partner that's called Earth Inclusive, and writing my 9th novel. And I have all kinds of other little hobbies. I'm a big tabletop role-playing game nerd, and I've kind of, since I was a kid, wanted to make my own D&D retro clones. So I've been sort of talking to some fellow artists and working on book design for maybe doing that. And that's kind of like, I don't know, about a passion project. But really the best way to find me is to just find me on Twitter at Arthur H. Walker and start a conversation with me. My books are on Amazon in print on demand rather, or Kindle format, and that's the only platform I distribute through at this time. But I think because of extended, you can find me on Barnes and Noble and some other places too if you look. If Amazon is not your speed, there are other options out there, I've heard.
Okay, then did you want to give your phone number out? So, if anybody wants to give you a call, say, hey, Arthur, I got a question for you. That's a joke, dude. Did we leave anything out that you wanted to close out or discuss before I let you go?
Kind of want to say is I'm really glad that there's an independent podcasting community doing work like this, and I'm so pleased that this format is able to reach people easily now, because I think a lot of people are working jobs and are in situations where a podcast is better than an ebook or a transcript of a conversation. So, like, I really think that what you're doing here is valuable, and what the podcasting community is doing is valuable.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I appreciate you saying that from my perspective as a contributor to that, but also as a consumer of that medium. Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. The information that's being distributed among independent podcasters is valuable, and it's interesting. I mean, I could listen to podcasts all day long, but sometimes it interferes with my work. I really sometimes need to concentrate very deeply
to get some work done,
Yeah.
and I can't listen to anything when that happens. So
Same. That's why I'm always behind.
yeah,
Always behind.
it's been a pleasure talking to you, Arthur. I really appreciate the time that you spent with me. I hope that very soon or in the near future, we'll be able to do something else and continue our conversation.
Likewise, friend. I really enjoyed myself today.
All right, brother. Good talking to you, Arthur.
Likewise.
Take care, man.
Take care.
Dead Hand Radio is a podcast about the Cold War, its history, and the effects it had on our culture, technology, and the future of our world. My goal is to examine these and other topics, to learn, to educate, to entertain, and exchange ideas with those interested. So join me, and together we'll explore a fascinating period of history and examine some incredible advancements in weapons, technology, science, art, and culture, and discuss how all of it relates to the future of our world. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on this program, drop me an email or visit deadhandradio.com. You can also find me on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm Andrew Hall, and this is Dead Hand Radio. Thanks for listening.